It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex. Steve, deep from his bunker, eating canned peanut butter and sardines. How you doing?
Canned peanut butter? That sounds horrible. Is there even a such thing as canned peanut butter? I hope
Yeah,
not.
it used to be military rations, or at least so it is according to where I would buy it at the Army surplus store.
Dude, I don't remember peanut butter in a can. You might be buying old World War II surplus, perhaps, after my time. I remember the old MREs had peanut butter in like a bag thing. You know, it was. I don't ever remember peanut butter in a can.
This was probably me buying it from a Army surplus store, Army Navy surplus store, excuse me, in the early 80s. So at that point, you can imagine the shelf. It might have been sitting on the shelf for decades. So that could have Korea,
been World War
let's call
II.
it.
Yeah, it could have been. My goodness. Yeah, no, I don't remember that. I mean, the only canned rations we had were these what we called sea rations, which was basically like this condensed cornflake bar thing. That was just awful. I mean, if you're starving, it wasn't awful, but you know, it's nothing anybody would eat.
By choice.
By choice. Outside of like, I'm out in the middle of nowhere and this is all I have to eat kind of thing. But I don't remember canned peanut butter, thank God. No, but yeah, I'm in the bunker here, watching the world voluntarily burn itself to the ground, which, doesn't make me happy. But it is what it is at this point. I'm proud of some governors and I'm distressed at others, as you probably are too. And I'm proud of the governor of Texas for making an effort to state business in the state of Texas will commence immediately in like a week. So that's good. I'm not proud of the governor of California, who's seems to be intent on ruining his state through the end of the year, which is dumb. But like I said, at this point, we are where we are with it. and what are you just gonna sit there and let me talk? You're supposed to have a witty response to this.
Sometimes you just let people stroll.
Hey, listen, the governor of Texas does not need my advice. He's doing the right thing. He's saying the state of Texas needs to be open for business immediately.
We'll see.
Amen.
Well, we'll see.
I can play this game too, Chris. I can just stop talking too. Forget the fact that we're on the show, on the air.
I'll look forward to I don't look forward to it, but we'll see. We'll see. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not a governor or a pandemic disease expert.
Thank God, because I wouldn't vote for you if you were my governor.
I'm well aware. Although I may keep more of your citizens alive. Zing!
I doubt it. Because they're going to die from being cooped up in their house for months on end unnecessarily. Depression.
Oh, now suddenly Steve's worried about people's emotional state. Mark the date.
Well, I'm worried that if we're going to kill more people than we save, or hurt or ruin more lives than we save, yeah, I'm concerned about that.
So if you want to, the next show is going to be talk to Steve, Dr. Empath, for all of your emotional.
Well, let's not go crazy.
I'll host.
Let's not go
I'll set
crazy.
The calls up for you, Steve.
Yeah, let's not go crazy. That might not go well. But from a macro perspective, sure. If we kill more people than we harm, than we help, that's not a good thing.
Yes. How can you disagree with broad statements like that?
I could just sit here and not talk too.
You're wrong. I don't know what to say. Is it that fun to debate?
I think if you look at the numbers in the state of Texas, I think you decidedly can say I'm definitively correct, which is why the governor has said what he said.
Well, it's a great experiment. We'll see. We'll let the data play out.
Absolutely. You want to talk about sports instead of just sitting here looking at each other?
Yeah. That seems like more fun than planned death. So
Planned death?
Yeah. Speaking of planned deaths, we look at something that the NBA is cooking up to maybe lead to the end of the NCAA men's college basketball as its primary feeder for professional talent into its league with this new barnstorming G League, Development League, and its first star, 20-year-old Jalen Rose is his name. Am I
No,
correct?
Jalen Rose is
Yeah, right.
former NBA great Jalen Rose, who's
Yes.
now an ESPN talking head. This
Jalen
is
Green.
correct. Now, Jalen Green isn't just some high school guy. Jalen Green is the number one prospect on ESPN's top 100 list. So he's a potential number one overall draft pick, depending on how the next year goes. So what has happened here is that Jalen Green has decided to forego NCAA basketball in favor of the NBA's professional pathway program. Now, this is a G League initiative. So what it means is he's not going to be assigned to a G League team. He's not going to play for, the LA, whatever it is, for example. This is a specific program for people just out of high school. Now he's gonna have a $500,000 salary, and the reason why the salary is $500,000 is that the NBA and the NCAA, I guess more accurately stated, has lost a bunch of prospects in recent years to the Australian National Basketball League. The LaMelo, whichever one of the ball kids is the latest. I always get their names mixed up. Whichever one of the
LaMelo.
Yeah, I think so. It's LaMelo or LiAngelo, one or the other.
LaMelo? Yeah, LaMelo Ball and R.J. Hampton are the two biggest names that have done that of recent times.
Okay, yeah, and so the kid that's a legit NBA prospect, LaMelo, is playing in Australia, and the reason is their salaries apparently are mid six-figure type salaries, and so the NBA needed to have a program that could compete financially with that to incentivize people to stay as opposed to go to Australia. So they came up with this professional pathway program, which it pays, on a par with the Australian National Basketball League. But the difference here is that it's a program. They're going to basically get all these kids together in one spot, train them for a year, send them through a bunch of personal development type programs to prepare them for the NBA and to be an adult. And then they're going to play a bunch of exhibition games against real G League teams and presumably other teams as well. And they are not drafted yet. They're not assigned a team. They will be drafted next year. So it's an interesting idea. I mean, I don't think that kids should be made to go to college if they don't want to. I also think the NBA is free to have whatever rule it wants. I don't care if they don't allow 18-year-olds in. That's a private business. It's their business. But I like the idea that there's an additional pathway for kids who just don't want to go to college, because some of them, you can go to Duke, but you're not really a college kid, so it's kind of dumb. If you're gonna do, one real academic semester at Duke, I mean, why are you there? It's stupid. So I get it, and I think it's a good idea.
No, I agree. In the broad strokes, it's definitely a good idea. Of course the NBA can do what they want, but I think they made a mistake when they barred the 18-year-olds. That's sort of neither here nor there, except that I think it's had a real, actually negative impact on college athletics in terms of the one and done phenomenon. I think that was like one of those unintended consequences that turned out to be a pretty big negative for all involved. And so something like this, that's a mid-level path. One, it starts, I don't know if it's like a great, cure, but it does help to take some of the financial pressure off some of these kids in these systems to sort of clean up the sport just a little bit. Because if you have a path to even low six figures, that takes some of the scamminess out of college sports if these players have a chance to go somewhere else to do this. I also find this super, super interesting, and maybe this is why I was thinking of Jalen Rose instead of Jalen Green, but there's all kinds of ex-NBA players behind this idea. So the league's commissioner is Abdul Rahim Sharif. Rod Strickland is deeply involved in this. So you can see a lot of ex-players starting to build what this system might look like. And I think it's super fascinating. You can I totally see why they come up with that kind of salary. It might be eye-popping, for a 18, 19-year-old kid, But considering that that's probably what around the amounts that the illegal payouts are for and the under the table stuff, probably is a comp there. And you're exactly right. If and smartly, this is just what the market is demanding. These players, Australia and a couple other international pro leagues, they have these options. So if they want to make this viable, they have to compete at a compete at a salary level, and they don't necessarily have to match it, because the other things that they're doing here, I think, are pretty smart. I like the barnstorming element. It's almost like it's almost a McDonald's All-American kind of young adult program in many ways. There's no real meaning to the games, but they're competitive. They're featuring talent. They're going to travel. So it almost is replicating that system for 19-year-olds. No one really cares about the competitiveness of the G League anyway. So if that starts to tweak some of that, no one's going to care. And they're building up so as the true empath on the show, they are putting together a holistic plan around what might be development for these players. Life skills, financial skills, some culturation to the world of the jump from, the life of a high school kid to the life of a professional athlete. I do like some of the things, which I think is probably because of the ex-players running this stuff, that they've gotten to equate what traditionally has been the reason you would suggest at least a couple years, if not 1 year of college for some of these kids as they make the jump.
Yeah. First of all, it's Sharif Abdur Rahim. You said it backwards, just to get the guy's name right. Yeah, you said Abdur Rahim Sharif, and he is the former NBA player who got in trouble for trying to kneel for the national anthem, or refusing to stand, I think, for the national anthem. Was told by the NBA, "You will stand." Period. The end. Years ago. He now is the G League president. Believe it or not,
he works for the NBA.
yeah, which is a bit ironic, but. Listen, I'm not totally unempathetic here. I do think all that development stuff is a good idea. It depends on if they're just playing lip service to it or they're actually doing it. And I guess time will tell. On that, because who knows? I just think it's the idea of keeping American talent in America is a great thing. Why let these kids have a better option halfway across the globe? Like 10,000 miles away or whatever it is. That's dumb. And it's not like the NBA can't afford this. No, they're not going to make any money off this team now. Nobody's going to watch this probably to any great extent. It's a money loss leader, but ultimately this will build, hopefully, more prepared players who will be more ready for the NBA. So I think all of that is great. It does change the NCAA landscape now. And the NBA, and the landscape has changed quite a bit over the past. What I think is 2006, I think was the year they went to they changed the rule again to make these kids go to 1 year in college. So what it's done is basically have the Mike Krzyzewskis of the world, the Dukes and the Kansas and the top programs, Rick Pitino, those guys are basically recruiting a new all-star team every year. And the public has just gotten used to seeing completely different names every single year. So if you get rid of the Jalen Greens of the world, maybe you have a team that you can market a little bit better because they're going to play at Duke for, 2 or 3 years, hopefully. And so it's better for you're not going to have some of the elite talent out there, but ultimately it might be better marketing strategy for the individual schools because there's names that people can identify with for several seasons. So that might be good too.
Well, what's the most powerful marketing thing for any sports league is quality play. And there's actually the counterintuitive but probably correct thing here is if you take that, I don't know, let's call it top 5, top 10% of talent out of the talent pool, the competition in college basketball actually improves. And with a sport whose thrives on a field of 67 teams or whatever we are up to now with the play-in rounds and all that, you need a deep bench of teams. And so I actually think you take that top tier talent has an alternative route, and you don't have the one and dones, you don't have you don't have those freshman phenom teams at Kentucky and what have you, then I actually think it improves the competitive aspect of college basketball in the long term.
Oh, yeah, I think absolutely it will. And not every kid is going to do this G League developmental program. Some people will want to go to college.
Yeah.
I guess where all this is leading is, does the NBA really need this rule at all? And they've apparently, by the way, if you want to read more about this, ESPN has an article from the 16th of April called Top High School Player Jalen Green Enters NBA G League Pathway. And so that's where a lot of this good information is coming from, this article. Apparently, the NBA has been in talks with the Players Association to end the one and done draft model. Personally, I don't know what there is to negotiate. I don't know why you have to negotiate with it. Can't you just end it? I mean, I don't know why the players union would possibly disagree with adding more members, to its league. I don't get that. I don't know why it's I don't know why it's something that has to be negotiated and hacked over ad nauseum. Just do it. And again, to be clear, I mean, the NBA can do what it wants. It's a private business. It's one thing if the government's forcing you to do this. It's another thing if the NBA wants. The NFL has a 3-and-out rule. You have to be removed from high school for 3 years, and presumably that's not necessarily to encourage people to go to college. That's presumably because an 18-year-old cannot withstand the rigors of professional football, whereas basketball players are different. It's not as physical.
Yeah, it's a much different physical.
Yeah.
That's just about the body and the level of the kind of sport and the contact, yeah.
I like, for example, baseball's rule. I don't know why the NBA or NCAA couldn't have the baseball rule. For those of you who don't know, what it is you can be drafted into Major League Baseball right out of high school. They have like 30 rounds of their draft. If you choose to not sign the contract and you go to college instead, then you have to do 3 years in college before you're eligible to be drafted again. So that's simultaneously encouraging education, which is always good, and then yet also giving these kids a pathway to professional life immediately if they want it. And many people decline to sign the minor league contract and instead go to college. Many do. So the NBA could come up with some idea like that if they wanted to too. Which would also work for me. Because that'd be good for the NCAA too, to have guaranteed 3 years.
I think they probably will. I mean, I think these steps are significant steps towards some kind of intermediate minor league, semi-pro, however you want to classify it, that's not college athletics. And, the two hugely successful models of that are Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League, which they're sort of, and there's differences obviously, but the governance in the system and the ecosystem around talent feeding is very similar, and including the balance between college and straight to some kind of professional contract. So there are very active models. I think the NBA was tiptoeing. This seems like a solid 1 foot step in front of the other. And quite frankly, given where we are in the world, for whatever reason and whatever the outcomes are, these kind of things will speed up in terms of their adoption for a ton of reasons. And so things that may have been bubbling and simmering and, the ideas and experimentation and, slower planning in the halls of the NBA, you'll start to see these things roll out a little bit faster. Even thinking about one of the reasons why it starts to make cost-effective sense for the NBA is if they start seeing 10% of that talent playing in Australia and other European leagues or what have you, which, by the way, considering the size of rosters, 10% of the talent pool in the NBA is a sizable amount of talent.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Just the cost, the travel, we don't know what global travel is really going to be like, there's all kinds of things that are going to be different. They want to keep these people at home, as you said earlier. They don't want to have to they don't want scouts in Sydney for 5 months of the year and things like that. Those aren't going to be as realistic, and it's much more cost effective. So it starts to make probably the $500,000 salary marker seem like a bit of a good deal over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think I don't necessarily buy the idea this is virus related, because this is going to go away. And people are going to travel again, and life's going to get back to normal, sooner rather than later, hopefully. But from a long-term basis, it's a cost-saving thing. You want to keep these kids under the NBA, get these kids under the NBA umbrella as soon as possible. And why would you want to send the scout for the 2020 NBA champion Los Angeles Lakers out to Sydney, Australia, when you can just send him to a G League training program center instead?
With all schedules, et cetera, coordinated at the Central League office.
Exactly. So that's much better for everybody. Much better. And if Jalen Green, wanted to go to college, that's fine. Go to college and go to Duke or, whatever you wanted to go to. That's totally fine also. And they can scout you there like they always have been doing. It's just the idea is keeping you out of from having to go to Australia or worse, like China or somewhere, which is exponentially harder, to train at or not train
So
at,
yeah,
scout at.
both. So we'll. I think this feels like a bit of a watershed moment to me. I think within 1, 2, 3 years, this will be kind of the norm. We'll see. A chunk of Jalen Greens every year, and it'll grow.
Yeah, I can't. And people need to understand the fact that Jalen Green in particular did it is a very big deal, because this is not like just some kid doing this, and this is not LaMelo Ball or whatever. This is the number one prospect in the country. Very big deal. This is the next. This is the kid. I don't know what schools he's being scouted from, but this is the next big Duke player who would have been
Zion
featured in the tournament.
Williamson.
Yeah, exactly. It's the next Zion Williamson type. So it's a very big deal, and it's a step in the right direction, because it's not fair to make people go to college if they just don't want to. And I've never liked the idea of college athletics bastardizing the true college experience. If they're not going to be real students, why send them? It's just dumb, and it's insulting to the people who want to go there for an education. So I'm all for it. 100%.
It's a much smarter, as much as I probably, if I had to choose, yes, no, I'd be for colleges figuring out a way to pay some of these players. But this is a much smarter way forward, at least in this sport specific. I mean, if you believe that there's a fairness issue there and an option issues there, and it's sort of like, why would they, you be forced to put on the yoke of college athletics in this scenario? This is a much smarter and probably fair and business, and by say business friendly, I mean sort of the business of all of the stakeholders, however that's defined, way forward than some kind of like weird forced luxury pay for your top tier talent, which should be impossible to extremely difficult to figure out.
Because we've been through that on this show a million times, and you have to bend and twist and turn and torture the laws to get something to happen. It would never be fair. This way, just you're a professional, you're going to get paid, and that's easy, and that's the end of it. And it also, like you said, no small benefit. Getting the money out, the illegal money out of the NCAA is a huge benefit. Huge benefit, because those people are sleazeballs, they're criminals. You don't want that. So just let them get paid like professionals, and that's the end of it. Period.
Yeah, and this wouldn't solve it all, but it would help.
It's a step in the right direction, and it would need to get bigger, because right now this is small. And you're talking about a handful of kids. So I don't know what the NBA would do if all of a sudden they've got hundreds of them, wanting to do this. That's, they'd have to kind of rethink the program. They couldn't have hundreds of kids doing it, all at once.
Well, then they'd have to figure out what you were talking about a minute ago, which is that you're going to have to figure out a way for teams to, have a way to claim they enter the draft earlier. They can't play in the league for X amount of years. You'd have to figure out that's the management level that you'd have to figure out.
Yeah, and that's where they really haven't got to that point yet.
Yeah. So super interesting. I actually kind of love this story, so we'll probably continue to track it and see its exponential growth in players who opt for this.
You're throwing out buzzwords now. It's not lost on me.
I didn't expect it to.
Ian said the exponential growth that didn't actually happen, Chris. But go ahead.
No. Okay. The next story we have is pour one out for the XFL, who used, in my opinion, used the cover of all this to cut losses earlier than they probably would have had been able to do in a normal world. But we no longer have the XFL, which gives us what? I'm losing count. That's 3 crashed. Well, I guess if you count arena, that's 3 crashed and burned alternative football leagues in the last 5 years.
It's less than 5 years. Are you kidding me? It's 1 year.
That's true. 2 if you want to be kind.
Yeah, because the last Arena League season was 2018, I think. Because, newsflash, we actually got the Hogsty to be credentialed media for the Arena League, whatever team, I can't remember their name. But we ended up not doing much with it because absolutely nobody cared. So we just, why bother? But that league crashed. Then what was the next one called? AAF? Was that what it was called?
American Association of Football? Was that what AAF was? I can't remember.
Yeah, the pre-XFL league.
The Ebersol baby one.
Yeah, that one. That one died in 2019. and now, or was it late 2018? And now the XFL's died. Now, raise your hand if you're
Alliance of
surprised.
American Football.
Thank you.
Alliance,
That's what
no
it was. I knew it
association.
was AAF. Yeah, it was okay. That so anyway, all three of those leagues have crashed since 2018, I think. So give it 2 years. Say 2 years. Anyway, I mean, this is going to happen no matter what. I think, Chris, you said it exactly right. This is a way for the XFL to cut their inevitable losses that were going to happen. Because if you look at the ratings were pretty good but not great in week one of the XFL. And two of their cities had decent attendance, and the rest of them didn't. It was Seattle and somewhere else. We're getting attendance in the 25,000 range, which isn't great, but it's better than the 10 that they were getting in every other city. 10 to 15 they were getting in every other city. But key, the ratings were plummeting every week. It went from okay in week one, decent, had a little bit of buzz, to like, what'd they get through, like week four or something? Um, by the end of it, there was no buzz at all. Nobody was watching. Attendance was holding firm. But, I mean, if they couldn't even keep up the buzz for more than 2 weeks, it was going to die. And it wasn't good football. That's the thing. What everybody needs to remember who wants to form one of these leagues, you're never going to get football that can compete with the NFL. The reason the USFL lasted as long as it did is that they were paying the players enough to entice legitimate pro players to their league. And that was a different world when players weren't making, the Landon Collinses of the world weren't signing $84 million contracts, so it was doable. You can't do that in today's world because you can't pay players massive contracts without set television contracts to, as income, So you got to start small, and if you start small, that means you're going to have practice squad level football and nobody's going to watch it. So
Football's an
that's what
incredibly
happened.
difficult sport to, not just to play, obviously to play, but also to organize, to be good at. I mean, that's part of its charm. I think it's actually what part of its uniquely American charm is that the level of coordination is not like any other sport, and so those things take. Those things take years to get right. I mean, there's no, go back and understand your NFL history. It took the NFL a long time to be anything more than a kind of afterthought league of its own, which sort of started to turn a corner. What, maybe the '60s, but really it was the '80s where it fully emerged into the dominance that it is now. So like it was no small feat for the National Football League to get there, and it had to absorb an alternative league and all that stuff. So this is not you cannot throw up a league or a team and have even anything remotely resembling quality level output. And considering people's level of expectations is SEC football and the National Football League playoffs, you're not going to get anything that even remotely resembles that. And by the way, in National Football League and college sports, there's horrible football down the chain on those leagues as well, because this is hard. And so this idea that you're going to throw up high quality product and the way that these leagues think they are and the time and the resourcing is just kind of a joke on the surface.
Yeah, and some people love like alternative leagues, and that's fine, if that's your thing. But you just can't expect that the quality of the game is going to be very good. And what that means is your audience is limited to people who love niche things, But that's people who love niche things are, by their very definition, a small group of people, and you're not going to entice your average fan to sit and watch too many XFL games. Because I'll be honest, I watched the first week and some of the second week, and I got bored with it because the game just wasn't very good. I got bored with it, and that's what I think most people did. That's what happened to them. And so, fast forward to now, we have virus pandemic, and so yeah, I think Vince McMahon saw this as an opportunity to just shut it down early. We know it's not going to work, so let's just use this as an excuse and get rid of it, ASAP. Now, the interesting thing, did you see this? The interesting thing is that the WWE actually had like a 20-something% ownership stake in the XFL. Now, McMahon said at the beginning of this that it was going to be completely separate from the WWE, but the WWE itself did, in fact, own a part of the league.
Yeah, well, okay, listeners, when you believe stuff that Vince McMahon says, you have to understand, and this is not even an insult, But you have to understand that the man has made multiple fortunes on the back of being a liar. His ability to lie is directly equatable to his success. And like I said, that's not an insult. It's professional wrestling. It's a farce. It's acting. It's make-believe. So, like, this idea that you would take anything that Vince McMahon says at face value is I don't know, to me, is cognitive dissonance.
Well, not only is it fake and a lie, but he flat out told people for decades that it was real.
Yeah,
You know?
because he's a flim-flam man. He's a snake oil salesman. And God love him. It's not a bash. It's just the truth.
Yeah, he's a snake oil salesman. Exactly right. And so with the idea of him saying, "Oh no, this is not going to be wrestling." Well, number one, he did it before. He did this to you once before.
Yeah, we're old enough to remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he did this before. And so now you're going to believe Vince McMahon, of all people, who's, says he's going to put on a legitimate football league and it's going to be separate from wrestling, and just trust me? Yeah, that's just crazy. I don't fault him for trying, and I don't fault people for watching. But if you thought it was going to do anything but fail rapidly, you just aren't paying attention,
My favorite piece.
Like the Arena League was a legit thing. That was a serious business. They tried to do it right. At the end of the day, multiple times. At the end of the day, the football just wasn't good enough to get people to watch. Simple as that. And that's what happened with the AAF had all kinds of finance problems and business problems. But even if they had been well funded, well organized, well run, not on what was clearly a fly by night operation. If they didn't have all that, it was still going to fail, because at the end of the day, the games weren't good. That's the same thing that happened to the XFL. The games aren't good.
And you got to capture hardcore sports fans, right? Because there's a for any of these sports, there's kind of a core, not insignificant amount of the audience that just likes everything, right? That likes sports. And quite frankly, in these off-schedule leagues, the true sports fan is just as happy to be watching March Madness, NBA and NBA playoffs, NHL and NHL playoffs, the Triple Crown, the golf in the Masters kicks back in. I mean, there are plenty of other highly dynamic options off-season than the NFL for your core sports fan, which still makes up a large segment of both audiences. And so, you got to compete with these things that sports fans love. They don't need alternative programming to March Madness.
No, and these, by the way, the XFL and the AF are not the only two leagues there's ever been. There have been other outdoor football leagues that have come and gone also. The main one's escaping me is the one that Denzel Washington's son played in for a while, and I think Dante Culpepper in his older years was a part of it. I can't remember, the name's escaping me. But that league was around for a while, and that was decent football. If you're a hardcore football fan, but ultimately it just doesn't work. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the thing is, like you said, there's so many alternative sports programming to watch that is at a high level, all those things you named, that, there's almost not room for this. There really isn't. Even in the deadest part of the season, which definitively is July, even then, after the NBA playoffs are over, football's in hiatus, basketball is over, the NCAA is over, you really have just baseball. Even then, there's golf tournaments, NASCAR races, horse racing. When does, Triple Crown is April, May? I mean, there's all sorts of things going on, even in the deadest of dead times, to keep people occupied. And that's the time of the year when people are on vacation, viewership is naturally lower, they have other things to do. So there's just not a lot of room. There's only so much sport. Even we, as sports nuts who are nutty enough about it to do shows and have websites and everything, there's a limit to how much we can consume. There is. And certainly for the people who don't care as much as you and I do about it, it's just too much.
Yeah, and they also compete with the NFL in these time areas, because what's the true football fan going to care about more, the draft, free agency, than bad football on television? They're in fact we're going to see TV ratings for this Zoom draft like you haven't seen. It's going to rival the Oscars and Super Bowl. But But yeah, so like you're also competing with football content that is much more dynamic, much more interesting, and which fans are way more invested in.
Yeah, I mean, the draft is going to be outrageous this year. It's going to be incredibly boring programming, just from a TV program perspective, because you're truly going to be watching like a Zoom meeting, like you said. But the ratings are going to be absolutely enormous because there's literally nothing else going on. So I'm interested to see how they do it. Because for example, the Redskins tried to do a virtual Ron Rivera thing last week, and the system crashed. Before he even really spoke. And I'm not really laughing at the Redskins over it. There's just an IT issue with all of this stuff. And so I'm interested to see what happens in the middle of the draft. Is it going to be like, the Minnesota Vikings turn to draft, and then, the GM's network goes out in his house, and, and his phone is tied to the network, and, they can't draft, and there's going to be issues like that. They're going to be fun to watch just purely from an entertainment perspective. They might have to like send a carrier pigeon out to the NBA office.
If anyone's running an online fantasy football draft, you already know it's going to be like, can someone hit pause on the timer? Frank's internet is out. Hit pause again. Jesus Christ, Frank, can't you get this right? Anyone who's I've run many an online fantasy draft. I think I see a sneak preview. And I heard someone say, to your point, that the great differentiator when we look back on this draft might have been who had the best IT department, because that might be the intangible in this year's draft in terms of like the IT department is able to keep everyone running and communicating, and if you have one that's working well, you might be out ahead of a couple that are struggling, and might end up means you get better talent by the end of the draft.
I guess if I was a team and I was going to do it smartly, what I would do, I would have multiple people at my house, first of all, with multiple different cell phones, and I would have a landline there too. And then you'd also have to have somebody else away. You'd have to have one of your scouts in another location at their house. And so if the worst came to worst, you could have the other guy at the other house and the other network draft people if it really came down to it. But yeah, I think you're going to have to get creative IT people. And they're kind of limited by home internet. Most people don't have professional, quality internet connections in their house. And maybe coaches who have oodles of money, maybe they do. But my guess is they don't. My guess is they're just subscribing to Xfinity like the rest of us, or, whatever. So it's gonna be fascinating to watch. And the other thing is, I think I said this before, but I'm really excited to see somebody jump in the camera screen in their underwear. By accident, on live on ESPN. That would just be really, really funny. Oops, I forgot, Charlie's running the draft. Whoops, jump out of the camp. That's going to be fun to watch. It is.
Don't take it into the bathroom. No.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is all reasons why the viewership will be up.
Well, also, and people don't have anything else to watch. The NFL's been really, really smart with this. I said it in the beginning when all this virus nonsense started that there's no reason why the NFL couldn't proceed on with free agency and the draft, and I was promptly yelled at by everybody under the sun, to include some major reporters at major outlets that said, "Oh, you're being insensitive, and there's no way the NFL could possibly have free agency and blah blah blah." Well, guess what, people? You were all wrong, and the NFL did it just fine, and they're going to get through the draft just fine. They were very smart by doing it because they've just taken over the sports calendar completely. Totally. It's all NFL all the time. If you've watched sports, have you been watching SportsCenter? I just can't. Yeah, because, if you're going to keep showing me highlights of games from, 30 years ago, I'm just bored with it. But the first few minutes of it is all NFL because that's the only new content they have.
News, yeah.
Yeah, so the NFL was brilliant in keeping their name in the forefront. Right now. Brilliant.
Well, let's look at something else that may be brilliant, and that was Wimbledon and the conglomerate that owns the stadium that Wimbledon is played in. It's always in the same locale in London. Or no, in England. I'm not sure exactly. I think it's in London. They have been paying pandemic insurance for 17 years with a $2 million premium. And it might give you, especially if you're on Steve's side of the fence, a clue as to why they canceled Wimbledon a little earlier than maybe they didn't hold out and see, because they were set to get a cool $141 million insurance payout, and so which is not gonna they're not gonna make money off that, but it's gonna do a lot to ease their losses. But wow, talk I don't know if that's luck, foresight, paranoia, but paying pandemic insurance for 17 years sure did pay off, and the total they paid doesn't even come anywhere close to the amount they'll get paid out.
Again, I don't know if it's how you categorize it. Are you so paranoid that you're going to buy pandemic insurance? Are you just overly, extremely detail oriented, or what the case may be? But so the specific numbers, they paid out 25.5 million pounds, which is the equivalent of 31.7 million in premiums over 17 years. They're getting 142 million back, which is about half, I think, of their profits. Now, I don't know if American audiences really understand what Wimbledon really is. Obviously, they know it's a tennis tournament, but this is a massive London social event. It's done in a place with lots and lots of courts, and it's a big sort of party central kind of atmosphere, where you walk around between the courts and between all the events that are going on all the time, because Chris, do you know how many players enter Wimbledon? It might be 100.
Well, especially consider there's really four competitions. There's men's, women, and there's doubles men's and women. So it's not there's actually four separate tracks of competition.
Aren't there a mixed doubles thing too?
Oh, there might be. That's right.
Yeah,
there might be mixed doubles.
This is not just like what you see on TV. American audiences may watch the Wimbledon finals. Especially since it's on London time, so it's on at weird times. For American audiences, you just see the Serena Williams match at the end. But this is big, and it goes on for 3 weeks. Hundreds of players all the time. It is a massive, massive, massive social event. And so if you are worried about virus stuff, it's the exact opposite of what you want, but to lose Wimbledon is a really big deal for London. And so that's probably why they were so paranoid about it, paranoid enough to buy pandemic insurance. Because if you lose Wimbledon, you're talking about major business. This is not just like the Super Bowl where it's one week and gone. It's a major thing. So kudos to them. But yeah, I think this is definitely why they just can't up and cancel it so fast. Because they're set money-wise. They can deal with a loss for 1 year of 50%. Because it's a hell of a lot better than 100% loss.
Yeah,
and have to worry about all the negativity that's associated with having the tournament. You go on.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that they know they had the payout coming, cancel early, and you save on some sunk costs that you might have done while you treaded water. To have tons of American tennis players have to travel internationally, that's also the Wimbledon would be much harder to pull off than say like an NBA finals, because there's so much international travel. It's involved. A global event. It's a global
right.
Tournament.
Right.
Yeah. There's two things. Well, one, I can attest to the sort of almost 2-week nature of the event. I worked for a long time, quarter mile from where they do the U.S. Open in Queens and Flushing, and so it would be crazy. Like this is the edge of New York City. You don't see too many upper middle class rich white people in the neighborhood that I worked in. But then for 2 weeks, whenever the Open was in, it was like crazyville. And so yeah, it's an event. These giant tennis tournaments and the U.S. Open, I don't even think can compare to Wimbledon in terms of scale and importance, but it's similar in its scope and size. And you would see it. It would be like a different locale for 2 weeks, and then it would shut off. So yeah, I guess that is why. And the British Open golf tournament did the same thing. So, I mean, maybe there's it could just be a slightly different insurance worldview that's going on there as well. They did, they've been bombed and all that. They've had these things visit their shores more than the Americans and more than a lot of other countries over the last 100 years. So it really is interesting that they would have the foresight to do this.
Yeah, well, the other thing is Wimbledon's hard to just move back a few months, because don't forget that they're playing tennis on grass. You can play football on dirt. The Redskins have been doing it for years. Redskins have been playing on painted dirt. Well, you can't really play tennis on painted dirt. And you're talking about England. England's climate is not conducive to growing grass in wintertime or even fall. And you have to have the tennis ball be able to bounce a certain way off grass. It's different than playing football on it. So combine the. You made a very good point by saying they could save a lot of the sunk costs by cutting it off early, and so they're probably okay financially, and you can't move it at all, so let's just bag it. We can't play it in November. Let's just bag it and just reschedule it next year. That makes a ton of sense for them. A British Open, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Maybe it's a British thing.
Yeah, that's sort of
I'll tell you one thing, though.
Take as well. It seems weird.
The ability to get...
That you'd have these two things so close to each other. Must, who knows? I have no idea about the intricacies of the UK insurance industry, so I can't speak to that.
I am going to guess that being able to get pandemic insurance going forward is probably going to be non-existent. It might be the end of the pandemic insurance industry.
Yeah. One reason I've always hated Wimbledon, and I'm not a big tennis guy to begin with, but I've always hated Wimbledon because all I associated Wimbledon was just as school was letting out and I was allowed to stay up late as a middle schooler to watch my beloved Letterman at the time, NBC Letterman, not CBS Letterman for those purists out there. And it would get, so my first 2 weeks that I would be off school would be preempted so that they could run Wimbledon late nights because of the time difference. And so you'd get Today at Wimbledon, and I would be so upset. So I have this deep-seated hatred for Wimbledon since I was 11 years old.
You know what, Chris? We finally found something you and I agree on. I cannot believe it. This is a historic moment for the show, okay? This is an historic moment. I loved CBS Letterman. Or NBC Letterman. My favorite show. I used to stay up and watch him late in high school. And those Wimbledon days when it would knock him later and I could not watch it was just devastating because I loved NBC Letterman and I hated Wimbledon for that exact reason. I cannot believe there's finally something you and I that's not Redskins rooting interest that we agree on. Let's stick to that. Let's not talk about, should the pandemic, close business or not. Let's stick to Letterman. I'm flabbergasted. Thank God there's one thing.
There we go. That and the D League. G League, whatever. I can never get their
it's
letter
the
right.
G League now. G. I think it's the Gatorade is G.
Ah, thank you. Now I'll remember it.
Yeah. Because it sounds dumb. I mean, D League is development league. Should be the developmental league by Gatorade is what they should do. G League just sounds stupid to me, but whatever.
Yeah, that's good. Now I will remember it. Gatorade. Yeah. And by the way, CBS. I knew the premiere episode of CBS Letterman that it was a different beast, and that a piece of my youth was dead.
Yeah, I mean, Letterman wasn't jumping onto walls in a Velcro suit on CBS.
No, exactly.
It became more of a traditional talk show host, and I still loved him till the end, but it wasn't the same. It was never the same.
No, it was not.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe, well, I don't want to speed past the Kumbaya moment, but let's talk a little bit about, which I actually don't have a big problem with this, but the PGA looking to reboot its season, I guess they call it, really, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty much the first major sporting league to come up with a real detailed plan and a kickoff date and all the other things. I mean, it's going to happen.
Well, that and NASCAR, both of those.
Yeah. But so they're basically doing, I mean, golf, you said it in the last show, Steve, which I've been thinking about for the last 2 weeks, is that it's the easiest one to do because the sport essentially is social distancing by design. You can't have that many people playing at one time in one hole, et cetera. Like the rules of the sport basically dictate social distancing. And who gives a crap about audiences, right? They do not add to the TV experience that much. You can't have those giant audiences really. And I don't think the revenue of the sport is driven by gate receipts. So it really was the easiest one to get up and running in those ways.
Yeah, I think the players would rather play without fans.
Well, sure.
Because it's easier to play golf when it's quiet. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the players would be happy. I think, obviously, the golf courses themselves would rather have fans because that's a lot of money in food and, local economy, all that stuff. But the PGA is an entity, yes, certainly. I mean, it's a major TV thing. And they have major TV contracts, and that's where they get most of their money. So absolutely, and all the things you said makes perfect sense. So it's easy, and the other thing is the infrastructure of golf is very easy. It takes a lot of people and a lot of effort to put on a football game or a baseball game. It takes no effort whatsoever to have a golf tournament. All you need is the normal, probably a few more than normal, greens and groundskeepers to get the course ready. But the actual act of putting on the golf tournament is just golfers and a couple cameras. That's it. So, I think it's easy. And, yeah, go ahead.
Well, even that maintenance part you talk about is also, that's one guy on a mower, right?
Right.
Even that is pretty easy to do within even the most draconian oversight rules.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, and the golf courses may pay extra attention clearly when they have a tournament coming up, but nonetheless, it's easy. It's just at the end of the day, it's a few groundskeepers, and that's it. So it's very easy. NASCAR a little bit tougher, I think, to put on because you've got a lot of the crews and the cars, and I don't know what it takes to prepare a track. Probably not much for the track, but the crews themselves, it's a lot of people to get those cars ready. So NASCAR is a little bit tougher, and
they make more from gate receipts at a NASCAR event too. I mean, that's a bigger loss of income.
Oh yeah, NASCAR gets more people than football games.
Yeah, 100,000 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a major deal, but all the same, I think they'd rather have income than not have income.
Oh sure.
I just think let's be honest. Loss. I hate to go down this route because it's just not going to go well. And I know this before I say it, but let's be honest and say that there's a political element to NASCAR here. NASCAR is originated from the South, and they've expanded beyond the South now, but it's a very politically conservative kind of event. I have no problem with it. I'm politically conservative, and that's not my point. But my point is I think the people who are NASCAR fans are more apt to want to see their sport go forward, just from a political sense than perhaps some other folks. You're not going to get a lot of, like, New York City NASCAR fans, for example, right? There's going to be, on a percentage basis, there's going to be a lot fewer Northeast New England types who watch NASCAR than in Alabama. And so I think those folks who are not in those major cities are more apt to want to see the country and their sport kind of open up again, and I think NASCAR plays into that, that demographic.
Yeah, I don't. But that's sort of you can't really argue against that. I don't know if that's necessarily driving their decision making. I think that
money's driving their decision making. I'm just saying it makes it easier.
The lower barriers to presenting their sport is the main driver.
But I think just their fan base, they're more apt. Like some people would be mad at the NFL right now. The NFL's not a good example, not in season, but some people would be mad at baseball for playing baseball right now. There's a group of people out there who would think this is not the right signal to send to society, whether right or wrong, and I don't want to debate that here, but NASCAR is going to get a lot less of that because their fan base, I think, is going to be more apt to want to see the sport go on.
Yeah, they'll get less blowback for sure.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Hard to you can't really argue that.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see how the PGA does it. I think it's the right move. I think we're going to have to show that if you do things smart and thoughtful, there's a ways to start reintroducing a bunch of this stuff. And I think the ones that have those lower barriers, can lead the way. So I actually commend the PGA on being able to at least trying to figure this out. We'll see how it goes on lots of different levels, but I think their plan is smart. And they'll, like anything else, including NASCAR for that matter, they'll probably see an uptick in viewers just because people are like, it's something. So they'll grab attention and eyeballs for sure.
Well, the UFC is the other one. Since the last show, Dana White got begged by a number of governors, apparently, and politicians to not put on his UFC event because he was adamant going into like 2 weeks ago that he was adamant about having his UFC event, go on through some limited format. And again, like I said, he apparently was asked by a couple governors to not do it, and he capitulated. But UFC's the other one. He's now talking about, I think, May 8th. Don't quote me on the 8th part, but May something is the first UFC event, part 2 here. So that's the other one.
How can we forget our friend Vince McMahon, who did stage a WrestleMania 2 weeks ago, I think?
Yeah,
Or
I
a week
watched a little bit of it.
So there's another one. But, we've already, whether you want to
Yeah.
call that sport or not. But
I don't. It's
yeah,
entertainment.
neither do
Yeah,
I.
it's not a sport. It takes athleticism, but it's not a sport. When you're not actually competing,
Right.
it's not a sport.
So a trapeze act takes athleticism as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Now the other major leagues are, I don't think anything's really changed from when we talked before. The Major League Baseball and NBA are still talking about some sort of single site lockdown, clear everybody and let them through the door type of situation, where they can go on with their season. So I think that's probably what we will see for the NBA and Major League Baseball to some certain extent. I think the issue with the NBA was whether they're going to let families in or not. We'll see. You'd have to get the families cleared too, to allow them to do that. So we'll see about that. The NFL is still up in the air. Our bet is still up in the air, for now. The NFL is apparently planning a contingency at least.
Oh, of course they are. They're probably 5 deep on contingencies.
I have no doubt. Yeah. So the NBA, the NFL rather, just doesn't have to decide anything now, so they won't. We'll see. But I think we're going to have to change the terms of our bet because who's the idiot governor of California? Gavin Newsom. Newsom has already stated that he's not going to allow at a state level to have events and sporting events in California through the end of the year. And so with that already announced, fundamentally, even if the NFL has every other team go as normal, California may have to be exempt from our bet because the governor's already stated that.
Well, that doesn't matter. That doesn't affect our bet. Our bet is
we haven't assigned the terms yet. We haven't even agreed on terms yet. What I'm saying is I want to carve California out because I'm going to lose by definition because the governor's already said he's not going to allow sporting events.
Well, no, we haven't. So, we haven't decided on what the payout is, but we just said we're talking about will the season kick off. Chiefs.
You don't have an agreement.
You don't. There's no California team. All we're worrying about is it will. What is it? September 8th, whatever that Thursday is. Chiefs, Packers, maybe. That is if it kicks off at 8:15 on that Thursday night. That's the line.
But we don't
know
nothing to do
with California.
Team. We don't. The schedule has not been announced.
No, they I'm pretty sure they have the Thursday. I think
the schedule has not been announced. We're gonna look real fast to see. Because sure, yeah. I mean, if the teams have been, I don't think the teams have been announced, but if it has been announced as non-California teams, fine. But if it hasn't been announced, we need to change the terms of our bet, and we don't have an agreement because consideration has not been established, and you can't have an agreement without consideration. So we don't have an agreement yet. We have an outline of terms, partial outline.
Well, it's September 10th.
Yeah. We're trying to find it. We're doing this live on the air. That's hence the silence. So Chris is staring at his computer trying to figure it out.
You may be
I know they haven't announced the full schedule yet because that's a major event for us at the Hogsty, and they're delaying it, expressly for the health, pandemic reasons.
All right. Well, we'll look it up. But yes, okay. We have not. The ink is not put on paper on the term. So yes, I'll give you. Although I'll have my lawyer contact your lawyer around the California. But I'll even seed. So we do have to see the participants of that game. We're going to waste too much time to know what it is right now.
Right. So for example, if the 49ers who were in the Super Bowl are the team, weren't they in the last Super Bowl? If the 49ers are the participant, because the loser of the Super Bowl is usually on that Thursday game. If they have to play in Las Vegas or something, as opposed to San Francisco, we need to account for that.
I would say, okay, let's go through these hypotheticals. So let's say it is Chiefs 49ers. And usually I think it's a default home game for the Super Bowl winner. So if that game kicks off in Kansas City,
Then that's,
at
yeah.
8:15 on September 10th, you would win. If, for whatever reason, the 49ers were a home game and they arranged to play that in Tucson, you would also
Well, I would argue. Well, I would, yeah, or I would argue that's just we'd have to call it a draw or something. I'm not saying I should win, but I'm saying we need to carve out California out of the terms of our bet. That's what I'm saying.
Or yes, but they just because they're a California team doesn't make me a winner. If they play it at a site that's not California and it continues.
Yeah, and again, the only reason is I say this is that the governor's already announced this. That's my point. Not because, we haven't even reached an agreement yet, and the governor's already announced it. That's all my point is.
Yeah, but that doesn't. There's still lots of
other possibilities, right? Well, we will decide this. So we don't want to have this debate too much on the air here, but we'll figure it out.
We have time in all this, which actually makes it somewhat interesting. Your boy Florio said on the 2nd of February, which is pretty outdated. It does say the 2020 NFL season will begin in Kansas City.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that could be, I don't. That's certainly not etched in stone and delivered from on high, but it's a clue.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll figure out the terms off the air. Yeah.
On my side, also the last thing I'll say to be on record. Only thing to me just rests on: will the season? Will toe hit ball at 8:17 on Thursday the 10th to activate the season? That's my line.
Fans or no fans?
Fans or no fans is not part of it.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's even more. That's even more in my favor then. I think that's. I think I would bet the house. Truly bet the house. No, I wouldn't truly bet the house.
I wouldn't even bet a porn mustache.
I just refuse because it's not a punishment. It's a reward to you to have a porn mustache, Chris. That's why. If it was a punishment to you, I would maybe consider it, but it was a reward. You shouldn't be rewarded for losing.
That's the American way I want, Steve. Don't you understand that?
No, it's not. That does have something you don't like, and that doesn't include publishing political diatribes on the Hogsty either. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's even more in my favor. I'm even more guaranteed to win then because it will happen. No matter what, it will happen on that day, whatever that Thursday is. So
I'm not losing confidence in my side, but I am my terms do benefit you.
Yes. Okay. All right. So for those of you out there who still want to contribute alternate terms, including the person who gave us the porn stash idea, come up with something a little bit different that doesn't reward Chris, and we'll consider it.
We have time on all fronts.
You have time.
All right, I think with this level of buffoonery, we are at the end of our episode for this week, or this 2 weeks. Steve, give us the promo trailer for the Hogsty Network.
Okay, so Rick Snyder's show Seasons of Discontent, which is his look at all things Washington, D.C. sports and life, is back for at least the next 2 weeks. They are doing a pre-draft and post-draft show, and it may go into hiatus again after that for a while because of the shutdown in sports, but we will have 2 weeks of Seasons of Discontent. The Hogsty marches on. Our pre-draft spectacular was released already before you hear this show, and we have all sorts of great written content, as you know, every day.
I look forward to your teeth gnashing about their eventual drafting of Chase Young.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to hear it from everybody, about it. And if you've listened to the Hogsty already, you know what my prediction was, so I won't repeat it here. But, yeah. Listen to the Hogsty for our pre-draft for Sean, Alex, and... Not Sean. Jamal, Alex, and Steve's pre-draft predictions.
There you go. A little teaser. Hit us up at the Hogsty or It's Just Business on Twitter, and we will talk again in 2 weeks.